Sue. Could not have said it better myself. That is splendid. Thank you to Sue and Chris, who are the people who do all the behind the scenes magic and make all this happen. I'd say they make me look good, but you know, nothing's going to make that happen. So, but thank you to you guys for doing a splendid job. So hello to everybody and nice to see you. Welcome to the February meeting of the Hamilton Amateur Astronomers. You know me, I'm John Govro. If you don't know me, I have the privilege of being the chair of the HAA. And believe me when I say that, it really is a privilege to chair such a very fine club. I am always delighted. You know what? I know some of you, and this is one of the great advantages of doing a Zoom meeting. Some of you are joining us from farther locales, well outside of the Hamilton area. And so some of you seem to have done okay today, but us here in Hamilton had a boatload of snow dumped on us tonight. If we had been meeting in person, it's entirely possible that we would not have been meeting at all tonight. So for all the complaining we've done about having to be cooped up at home and having to do everything over Zoom and not getting to see each other in person, at least we are getting to have our meeting tonight, and that's a good thing. I'm just going to make a couple of announcements here, and then we're going to get right to the good stuff. I'm just going to start out by saying, you know what? You know, our eclipse glasses have arrived right here. Here's our eclipse glasses. So where's the camera? Whoosh, fantastic. Look at that. Great. So nice. There's our website. There's all the juicy info inside about using them. And come on. Phil says those look great. Look at that. Now that's how you make me look good right there. Fantastic. So of course, the eclipse glasses have arrived. We are on schedule to have these out and distributed once the weather's a little warmer and once it is safe to set up a distribution point. There is a free pair of eclipse glasses for everybody in the club. And of course, we're headed towards the June partial solar eclipse. It's going to be a beauty. Yes, you have to get up early in the morning for it, but it's going to be nice. And everybody's going to have a pair of these. We have a pair for everybody for you. The beginners group for 2021 is going well. We've already had they've already had two meetings so far this year, going splendidly. Fabulous group of people. Because a couple of members expressed an interest in exploring the area, the club has formed a committee to examine what more we can do about light pollution, from education to municipal involvement to whatever other ideas they come up with. A big thank you goes out to the volunteers on that committee, Paula Owen, Kevin Solich, Les Webb, Mario Carr, and Bernie Vanass. If you have any insights or thoughts that you would like to share with the group, please do feel free to get in touch. I'm sure they would appreciate all the input that you have. At the end of the meeting, we will have more announcements on all the upcoming activities and events of the club with dates and stuff like that. But now I want to get to the good stuff. All right. You did not come here to hear me talk. You came to hear Phil tonight. All right. So I want to get to our very special guest speaker for this evening. I'm very pleased that we have Phil Groff with us here. Phil is the executive director of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. It's a position that he took over about a year and a half ago, I think, Phil, is that right? About a year and a half, give or take. He can tell you the numbers. Phil has faced considerable challenges, just like the rest of us. He has had to find a way to propel his organization through this pandemic, just as we have had to do that same thing. Phil comes armed with a PhD in psychology from the University of Toronto. He draws on a long background in managing nonprofits, such as Sustain Ontario, the Alliance for Healthy Food and Farming. And Phil now brings to the RASC the skills that have helped his organization survive during this pandemic. I am sure that you would all join me in giving a very warm welcome to Phil Groff. Phil, good evening. Welcome to you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening. I'm glad that we're able to get together despite pandemic regulations and despite the best of winter weather trying to keep us all apart. We've obviously been doing a lot of virtual meetings and virtual talks at RASC as well. So it's great to once again be on a Zoom call with an active group of astronomers. And so thank you for having me. And I promise that I will come and see you in person when we're able to do such things again. So the fact that you've got me here virtually tonight doesn't mean you're never going to see me after this. I brought some slides with me, and I thought I would just kick off with those, and then we can just chat afterwards. You can ask me anything you want. In fact, I've kind of subtitled my presentation for this evening, as you'll see. Let me just get it booted up here. Make sure I share sound. And there we go. Just a general welcome from the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, or everything you've always wanted to know about the RASC, but we're afraid to ask. So feel free to ask any embarrassing questions, anything you'd like to know. I've made it my business since I've been part of the society for the last, it really is close to a year and a half now. It's I guess 16 months or so. So like literally we're just off by a month or so from a year and a half. And one of the things I was realizing early on is that within our society, there grown a disjunction between the people working kind of centrally in the National Society office and the centers spread across the country, and with lack of communication and being out of sight and out of mind comes a fair amount of distrust, and rumors start to grow, and you find yourself putting out fires that you didn't even know had been lit. And so I made it my business to say I wanted to, within my first year on the job, visit every single center across the country and at least have a face-to-face experience with everybody, get to look people in the eye, let them see me, that I'm a real live human being, and reopen whatever dialogue may have broken down over the last couple of years. Of course, a couple of things worked against me. First of all, I hadn't really thought through the whole notion of visiting 30 centers across the country in 1 year, especially when a lot of them tend to hold their meetings on the same Friday night of the month. So just as a practical exercise, it became looked like it was going to be impossible for me to keep that promise. And then, of course, partway across the country, sitting in a hotel room in Winnipeg, having just done a center talk there and preparing to move on 2 days later to see folks in Saskatoon, all of a sudden the world ended. And COVID-19 meant I had to get on a plane, turn around back to Toronto as quickly as possible, and hopefully still be able to get back in as everything was shutting down everywhere very quickly. So that was how I spent last March. And I'm sure you guys had similar experiences locally. And very quickly, we had to make a lot of decisions and a lot of changes to the way we did things. But before we get to all that, I thought I would just start off with some basic background information, because when John and others approached me about coming in and speaking tonight, they said that while many people in the room here will be quite familiar with the Royal Astronomical Society, the RASC, many will not, and may not know things about its history, background, the way it's organized. And so just to give a broad overview for a little while would be a good use of some time. So I'm going to do that now. This is kind of the governance document I come back to. It's our most recent strat plan, which at this point is still very dated. It's from back in 2017, but the core of this is still good. And the core of this is I think very strong, which is we have a mission about being the premier organization of amateur and professional astronomers, promoting astronomy to all across the country, and enhancing understanding of and inspiring curiosity about the universe through public outreach, education, and support for research. 5 pillars that I kind of hold myself accountable to, and that I see as the job of the society writ large, is to provide value to our individual members, to provide value to those 30 centers that we're organized in across the country, to provide value to the Canadian public, and really beyond Canada as well, on the international stage to a certain extent, to provide value to the scientific community. We're not doing as much of that as we did back before, say, Casca branched off in the 60s and early 70s, but still, we publish the only peer-reviewed journal on astronomy in the country, and we do a lot of education and outreach to try and generate the next generation of STEM researchers interested in astronomy here and astrophysics and space science and other related disciplines. So we have a bit of value to the scientific community. Last but not least, and of course, what keeps me awake at night is all of this only works if we're also financially sustainable. So trying to make sure that the various sources of income that we have, and I'll just tell you, I normally at this point with the centers, that if I give a talk at a center, I'd break off and I'd show our books for the last year and things like that. You guys presumably aren't. I mean, if you want to see our financial statements, I can show them to you. They're not a secret, but that's something the centers want to grill me on more than anything else as they try to determine whether or not they're getting money's worth for their membership fees. I will say we're about $1 million a year organization, all told, and about a third of that comes from membership fees, and about a third of that comes from our publishing arm, and about a third of it comes from donations and grant projects that we do. We are a national charitable organization, and so we do get donations. Not as many as perhaps we could or should, but that's not your problem. That's my problem. A little bit about our history. So we've been around since 1868, when we were founded as the Toronto Astronomical Club, like right after Confederation. We got a jump on December 1st, 1868, the Toronto Astronomical Club, and within the year, we had broadened the notion of club to call ourselves the Toronto Astronomical Society. So already the word society had crept into our usage, and you can see some of these early milestones here. Our mission statement at the time said that we were to be a society formed for aiding of each other in the pursuit of astronomical knowledge. And the whole idea was to hold regular meetings to discuss the latest news of astronomical discoveries, to catalog and celebrate members' own observations, to plan for upcoming astronomical events, and just to mutually support one another, becoming more skillful at astronomy. It died out a little bit within the first couple of years, but really came back in around 1890, stronger than ever, and has sustained itself since that time, including through, of course, the first great pandemic that Canada endured almost exactly a century ago, and so we've been around since then. But I thought I'd just remind you of a couple of these early dates here, and then I'm not going to go into as much detail in these later slides. I will also say these first couple of slides here were prepared for me and with me by a fellow that I'm very fond of, that some of you may know, Randall Rosenfeld, who's our society archivist and also the museum director of the Dorner Telescope Museum. He's just a font of historical knowledge, and the person I always go to when I'm trying to still learn the ropes, only being 16 months on the job. So every so often I like to be able to still play the dumb new guy card. So some of these early dates. Well, let's bring this fellow up, who some of you may or may not know. Starting in the 1890s, this fellow, Dr. Clarence Chant, was a professor at the University of Toronto, and really he's not noteworthy for being a great astronomical researcher. What he's noteworthy for is being a great organizer and a motivator, and someone who really always pushed for astronomy as a science and as a field of endeavor within academia and outside of academia, in the lay public here in Canada. And so he's really, in many ways, the founding father of our society, although he wasn't, of course, around in the earliest days back in the 1860s. But just to give you an idea of what kind of fingerprints you find of Chant on our society, he started in 1907 the journal, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, that peer-reviewed publication I mentioned earlier, growing it out of our earlier transactions that we used to have as a meeting. So that the journal starts in 1907, and the same year he starts our Observer's Handbook, our flagship publication that we put out every year and have every year since. Chance started it, full of astronomical data. Some of you may use it. It's a great, Bible to have on hand when you're trying to find out what's happening this week in the sky, what's happening this month in the sky. Chance started both of those and served as editor-in-chief of both of those publications for the next 50 years until his death. So our society is 150 years old. For the middle third of that, A lot of our intellectual heritage was due to this person. So his scowling portrait still is hanging in our library, and so every so often I remind myself of just how much of a difference even one person can make in terms of helping to get a movement started and really starting to professionalize a movement. This photo is on our website, and it is a very popularly visited spot. You're welcome to come take a look at it. It is a framed photo of our Royal Charter. Many people want to ask about the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and when we got our Royal Charter and how it is that we have royal assent and all of that. The long and the short of it is there is no Royal Charter. There never has been. The real story is somewhat convoluted, but what it amounts to is in 1903, we sent a letter to the Governor General asking if the Governor General would ask the Privy Council in England if the king at the time, Edward VII, would allow us, as we were in the process of changing our name from the Toronto Astronomical Society, recognizing that perhaps we should have a broader mandate. We were starting to get interest from other communities to being a Canadian Astronomical Society. Would it be possible for us to use the word royal? And in that sense, kind of ape the Royal Astronomical Society in Great Britain. We got an answer very quickly. On 27th of February, 1903, a letter was sent, and I'm just going to read out a chunk of it to you here. I have now the honor to inform you that the Governor General has received a dispatch from the Secretary of State for the Colonies, the Right Honorable Joseph Chamberlain, who's the father of later Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, acquainting His Excellency that His Majesty the King has been graciously pleased to grant permission to the Toronto Astronomical Society to adopt the title of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. I have the honor to be your obedient servant, Joseph Pope, Under Secretary of State, blah, 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 blah. So that's a letter received in the Society office from the Governor General's office, from the Privy Councillor for this and Under Secretary of State for the Colonies, expressing the verbal assent of King Edward VII that we could call ourselves the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. A little bit of broken telephone there because we don't have the letter in our archives anywhere that we received from the Governor General. All we have are the proceedings of the meeting at which that letter was read. So this empty frame really does, I think, very well encapsulate the situation. And various historians in our society have over the years tried to pull at various threads, not too hard, because there's always the danger that if you pull too hard, the whole thing might simply fall apart. And it'll turn out nobody's got records anywhere of this having taken place. So for now, no one's telling us we can't call ourselves the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And so we're keeping the name, although we have at various times flirted with changing our names in the last decade or so. So anyway, there's the charter. It's stated on our website that any of our members are free to download precisely one copy of it for their own records and personal use. This period of the society right up to the end of World War I is also when we actually did grow beyond the city of Toronto. We had our first chapter outside Toronto open in Ottawa in 1906. Our next center was Hamilton in 1908. Then in 1910, Winnipeg, Regina, leaping right across the mountains to Victoria in 1914, where of course there was a lot of activity around Plaskett and the opening of the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory. So that put us coast to coast almost, except we didn't really have a center on the East Coast until significantly later. But by 1918, we had also spread to Montreal. So that's the early story of the society and how we grew in the early years. I'm not going to go into the same detail in these following slides. I will share these slides with you after I'm done. So you can read through all of this history. You can also get a lot of it off our website, or we've got pretty extensive archives also available on our website, free to the public, so you can dig through any of this to your heart's delight. Or you can send Randall Rosenfeld an email. He would be delighted to talk to you at length, whatever length you'd be willing to endure, about any of these topics. This period here, this middle period of our society, these 50 years are really when A lot of professionalization happens. RASC begins to build an international reputation, starts to become more involved with professional astronomical endeavors around the world and here at home at the various facilities, such as as I said, the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory, the Dominion Observatory in Ottawa. The David Dunlop Observatory, of course, gets built during this time period north of the city here. And of course, we're involved, as I say, in various international expeditions and such. But right around 1969 is when we start to get a major fracture in the society between the more professional astronomers, the academic astronomers, and the laity. And that's in fact when Casca breaks off and forms on its own, which is fine. We maintain very good cordial relations with the Canadian Astronomical Society. Casca to this day. They meet the kind of the professional needs of an academic field in a way that RASC would not be able to. And of course, we're very fortunate that many of the people who are members of Casca choose to also maintain a RASC membership. So we're one of the few scientific amateur bodies in the world and astronomical amateur bodies in the world that also still has a fair number of professionals in the mix. And so we still have that dialogue. Of course, astronomy is one of those fields where citizen science is still important, and where amateur observers, people like, unknowns like David Levy, still make huge contributions to the field and become international celebrities for the contributions that they make. I'm just going to point out a couple of things towards the end of this, and that is we acquired Sky News in 2015, which is a publication some of you may be familiar with. It grew our publications arm nicely and provided another venue for communicating about astronomy to the public. And most recently, what Randall would want me to talk about here is the growth of our latest project, the Dorner Telescope Museum, and also you can see in the lower left corner there our robotic telescope. I'm going to talk about all of those in a little bit more detail, because it's what's current and what might be things that folks in your club might be interested in interacting with us about. So I'll go into some of those in a little more detail now. But those were the history slides I wanted to get out of the way. People might want to take notes for the next few minutes, because there'll be a test on this slide as soon as I'm done talking. Now, this is our org chart. I'm terrified by it. I'd expect you to be terrified by it, but it's just to give you an idea of how complex it is to try and run a society of 5,000 members in 30 centers across the country with a 153-year history. Some of those members having been volunteers for the society for 40 years plus, 50 years plus, et cetera. And so managing this beast, I often liken to it's like steering an ocean liner, because it doesn't turn very quickly. It's not a nimble craft, but there's a lot of power behind it in the sense that there's a lot of legacy propelling it forward. And we still have some wonderful volunteers who are doing a lot of work for us. For example, on all these various committees you see down here, the ones up here are mostly about operating the society, perhaps not as interesting to you folks. But down here, we've got our astroimaging committee that runs our astroimaging programming and also just generally advises on astroimaging. Our education and public outreach committee, which is very heavily involved in schools and curricula, trying to keep astronomy alive in the science curriculum. Our history, as I mentioned, we've got some very avid historians of astronomy and of the RASC itself within our ranks. And in fact, we're just about to release a new book. I say just, but by the end of 2021, hopefully we'll be releasing a book celebrating our 150th anniversary back in 2018 with historical essays highlighting some of the history of that 150 years of astronomy in Canada. We have a light pollution abatement committee that's very active and for example, is involved in designating dark sky preserves across the country. Two new committees that are working very hard to try and bring the RASC, kicking and screaming into the 20th, if not 21st century, our Inclusivity and Diversity Committee and our Next Gen RASC Committee that are both trying to help deal with the fact that we have a wonderful old society that has many 40 and 50-year members in it, but we actually need to attract a new generation of members that is perhaps a bit more reflective the diversity of Canadian society. And so that's what both of those two committees are helping us with. And of course, our observing committee that runs our observing programs. I'm just briefly showing you our board of directors that are currently responsible for the governance of the society. Our chair is Robin Foray from Calgary. Past president is Chris Gaynor, also a Canadian space science historian. Has written various books on the contribution of the scientists from and engineers from the Avro Aero project to the NASA Apollo program, and indeed the precursors of Apollo with Mercury and Gemini. We have Charles Ennis, who is also a published author. He's written a book on building small observatories, collecting best practice stories from around the world, and also a book on solar observing. We've got various other people. I'll just briefly mention our treasurer, Catherine Carr, our secretary, Briggs, Michael Watson's our legal counsel, as well as one of our VPs. Brendan is from Thunder Bay and is the newest member of our board. Here you can see our board hard at work. This is last March. We had a retreat in our offices. This is literally like the week before everything shuts down, and almost the last thing we did publicly together, even as a staff. So I keep these pictures up to remind myself that there was a time we actually were in the office all at once. But just to introduce you to some of the staff members you may interact with at some point. That is Renata, who is our director of finance. If you ever have any dealings with the society on a financial level, that'd be who you'd be talking to. Jenna is our outreach coordinator. So she is someone you will definitely see if you attend any of our online programming right now. She's the one that's really helped keep a lot of our programming alive during COVID by helping us pivot to a lot of online delivery. This is our new, I still think relatively new, although it's now been a year, editor-in-chief of Sky News, Alendria Brumges. We have our fundraiser over here, Lisa. On the other side, here you can see Adela, who's our membership coordinator. That's Randall, the historian and Telescope Museum director I was telling you about a moment ago. You can see that Jenna is on the other side of the room as well. I'm not sure how she managed that when the photographer literally just pivoted 180 degrees to take these two pictures. But on the other hand, if you ever interact with Jenna and get to see what her energy is like, you will not be surprised that she manages to be in both sides of the room simultaneously. Speaking of Jenna and some of the things she did for us as we were pivoting last March to try and keep the society alive and going, despite the fact that we realized that it was probably going to be a long time before we'd be allowed to do anything like hold a star party again or have any kind of a public outreach event. We started creating a lot of online content. So one of the first things we did was we started running self-isolation star parties, we called them, on alternate Wednesday nights, or eventually down to just one Wednesday night a month. Some of that we did using our robotic telescope out in California, but it became increasingly difficult as we got into the summer months and California sunset got later and later in Eastern Standard Time and in various other parts of Canada. So we stopped using our robotic telescope for that, but it just started doing a lot of speakers and stellarium views and things like that for those star parties. As I said, we produce that book, the Observer's Handbook, every year, and a lot of people find it, like as I said, the Bible of these for all their observing. But it's a pretty intimidating brick, and even for our members, for many of our members who've been with us for many years, you kind of open it up and it's so dense and full of so much information, it's hard to even tell where to start. So we ran a course called How to Use the Observer's Handbook, where we had the editors of each section of the book come on subsequent weeks and just explain, here's how to get the most out of this table, here's what this chart's in there for and what you use it for and how it works, and by the end of that course you've got a pretty good idea of how to make the most out of this book that you get every year. Explore the Universe is a program that was really tied to one of our observing programs. It's the one program we have that's open to non-members in terms of observing programs, and we have a guidebook with it, a little thin volume called Explore the Universe, originally enough. that we now give out to all our members as soon as they join, and we use it as a calling card at events that we go to when we can go to events. And that was a chance to in an online course fashion, take people through, a 4 or 5 month period of observing, during which time they could catalog, 100, 120 different observing targets, and actually get credit for them and earn a pin and a certificate for completing that course of observations. So many did. We gave out 3 times as many observing certificates last year as we did in any previous year. But having said that, it was also, I think, just valuable for folks who didn't complete the program, but who just wanted to learn more about the night sky and about what was visible during various different weeks of that particular portion of the COVID crisis. We're going to run that course again later this year to hit some slightly different targets than we did last year by offsetting it by some weeks from what we did last year. But in April, instead, what we're going to do is we're going to run a similar program called Explore the Moon. And we've got 2 different workbooks for that. One for using binoculars, one for using telescopes, and we're going to take people through in the course of a couple of months, take people through the basics of lunar observation and get people really familiar with our natural satellite. We have a speakers series that we run every so often. Most recently, we've been doing a fair number of historical talks, but we've also had, for example, we had an Apollo astronaut on. We've had astrophysicists and astronomers on talking about their areas of research. So you can always go to our website to see what's coming up in the near future. I'll just give you a little teaser that unfortunately you missed a good one just last night. This was the speaker series we had last night, Astronomy Today, Framing the Future, a wonderful panel with these 4 amazing women in astronomy at various different places in their career, various different types of work that they do, talking for International Women in STEM Day about the role of women in astronomy and the role of and how to encourage the next generation of women to become interested in astronomy, or better yet, how to not discourage the next generation of people who are born naturally curious and want to know about the universe and our place in it, and how not to tell them that, well, that's not your job. That's those are telescopes are boys' toys. So that was the speaker series last night. Every other week, we have a wonderful, just freewheeling discussion, and this week in the night sky, as shown through Stellarium, event called Insider's Guide to the Galaxy that happens every other Tuesday afternoon, and it's just a fabulous dialogue between 2 people, as I say, riffing on what's happening in the night sky around that time. And sometimes they do special topics, like they did a whole section on the astronomy behind science fiction, where they pointed out where various places mentioned in for example, the original Star Trek series are actually found in the night sky. Anyway, those are all sort of online programs we have available. For those of you saying, I had no idea Rask was offering these, that's terrible, I've missed out on all these programs. I'd love to learn how to use an observer's handbook because I buy one every year. Not to worry. All of these things are up on our YouTube channel. So you can go to our YouTube channel and you can check out any of the prior programming. We try to get it up as quickly as we can, and we try to make sure that we put up edited footage, so we've got thumbnails to allow people to find the specific points in the talks that they want to find, that sort of thing. So please come by our YouTube channel and check these things out, or check out the calendar on our website and see what's coming up next. And we look forward to seeing you on one of our Zoom webinars. So a little bit over 6 months before I was hired with the society, a donor from Kitchener-Waterloo, a longtime member, Rudolph Dorner, came forward and made a proposition to Rask, saying he loves telescopes, he loves the night sky, he loves Rask. He unfortunately is terminally ill with cancer, and he would like to make a bequest in order to see that his interest and such gets preserved somehow. What he would like to do is to donate to create a museum for telescopes and observation, featuring Canadian telescope makers, telescope users, instruments from all of Canada's history, and really have the RASC be the home of this museum. So if you go to our website right now, you can see the earliest glimmers of what's on there. The collection is already growing very quickly. Randall is out purchasing wonderful artifacts from collectors, and as often as not arranging donations from people who have things in their collection that they're more than happy to see get a good home. I would say right now we've got a good home, but not a great home for them. It's okay. RASC is going to be moving before the end of the year. We have to leave our office building in Etobicoke because it's being torn down and turned into a seniors residence. But that means we're going to be able to find a new spot, and the new spot we find is going to have museum space dedicated in it, 1,000 or more square feet just for the Dorner Telescope Museum, which will be free and open to the public. Anyone will be able to come in and tour the exhibits. We're going to very much make it a hands-on museum. It's Rudolf Dorner's wish that these instruments not live carefully curated behind glass and hermetically sealed vaults, but instead that to the extent possible, we allow even school groups of children to turn knobs and look through eyepieces and see things out windows or that have been hung at various distances and such, or to the extent possible, taken out for field trips for nighttime viewing. One of the projects we have in mind, again, once things open up, so we're talking late 2022 before this can happen, is we're planning to do a road show traveling across Canada to various communities. And the theme of it will be something like, come see Saturn through 4 centuries of telescopes. And you'll be able to come really experience what it was like for people in different time periods to make observations and understand why people recorded things the way they did because of the impact of the optics that were available to them on their observation. Although in many cases, of course, what's astonishing is just how good some of these early pieces are. I've been thrilled to be able to look through some of them myself. We have a lot of original pieces. We also have some carefully chosen replicas that we've had commissioned for some things that have to be in a telescope museum, even though they don't directly relate to Canada. I'm just going to take you on a brief little tour of some of these things and show them to you. But first of all, here is Randall yet again, our curator and the director of the museum, and that's Rudolf Dorner. He's our founding benefactor for the museum, and of course we're always looking for other people to make donations. Here you see the one corner of my L-shaped boardroom / library / archive / telescope museum. It's literally that same room you saw the photographs of the staff in before, but this is just turning around that L-shaped corner behind the second picture of Jenna, not the first picture of Jenna. And so you can just see how cluttered things are. And it's not really a museum right now so much as a room with a lot of telescopes jammed in it. And that's just unfortunate. The piece you see in front of you right here in this picture here is a beautiful piece from like 1903, I believe. Lovely refractor, and we hope to have that out at some star parties when we're able to hold star parties again, just as they did in 1903, 4, and 5, because it's still a lovely working scope. Here you see one of the replicas. There's a beautiful replica instrument maker in Quebec that we went to meet my second month on the job, and we picked up these replicas of, and people here immediately recognize what these are. These are the 1609 and 1610 Galilean scopes. And this is the stand that they are always displayed on, that you see images of. You see Galileo and woodcuts of Galileo looking through the scopes on this stand, even though that stand did not exist in Galileo's lifetime. And this was not a mount that he ever used. This was a mount that was built by the court to display his scopes after posthumously. And in fact, it includes this piece here, which is actually a display of the original lens from the end of the 1610 scope. And because the lens cracked. And in fact, our replica maker here has in fact replicated that crack in the lens here. And so that's why it was taken out of the scope and mounted separately. But of course, you can see the people building this display didn't quite know how to display a telescope, or it was the first time they'd done anything like this. The only thing they had to work on was like church architecture. And so what this is, of course, this is basically a monstrance. The sort of thing that in a Catholic church would be used to display the consecrated host. And that's what they've used to display Galileo's lens. Anyway, this is, of course, a replica, of course, of all of these pieces. But we felt we couldn't have a telescope museum and have kids come in the front door and say, "What about Galileo?" Well, okay, yes. So, what about Galileo? Here we go. Similarly, you can see me at, again, one of the last public events we did last winter before everything shut down. I am here demonstrating a gorgeous, simply gorgeous replica of Newton's reflector. So that's literally the reflector. Well, it's a replica, but literally the replica of the reflector that Newton used as his calling card to get entrance into the Royal Society. It was his proof of concept for a reflecting telescope, and it's much smaller than you thought it was, right? And yeah, this is a life size replica. This, of course, is Samuel de Champlain's astrolabe. So we have a replica of that. And here's some actual real pieces. So this is a lovely, amazing F8 12-inch Newtonian that we have from the 1920s. You can see sketches of this telescope in that 4-volume book, for those of you who are familiar with history, about homemade telescopes and the telescope makers from back in the early part of the 20th century. This is the actual scope, and it's laying on its side, looking like a World War II torpedo, because I can't display it right now, because you can see what its mount looks like, and you can only imagine how tall this scope would actually be if we actually put it on that mount, and we simply don't have room in it. That's the primary there in that case. The primary has been taken out of the tube for now, just to keep it safe. So lovely piece. Two other genuine artifacts in our collection. You see Francis Watkins' refractor from around 1750, and you can see the end plate for that as well, which would have held the primary, the secondary, I guess, in place, and also the eyepiece focuser. And here we see a reflector that we've just recently acquired that turns out to have been owned by Dr. Banting from the early part of the 20th century. So in addition to obviously his very famous work in medicine and biomedical research, he was an avid amateur astronomer, and this is his scope. You can see all of these in the issue of Sky News from September, October of last year, where we did a little splash on the museum. It's a couple more pages long than just this. But I wanted to finish by showing you this one piece. Some of what we're also trying to do is showcase the work of even still living and extant telescope makers here in Canada. Some of you may know this gentleman. This is Norman Fulham from Quebec. He is a magnificent woodworker and lens grinder, and has developed a technique for making giant-sized mirrors by sort of sandwiching two pieces of glass with a honeycomb lattice of pillars that he has calibrated exactly the right materials so that the whole thing bends and flexes to the correct parabolic shape exactly correctly, as opposed to the normal stresses that would happen from trying to have those three different layers being bent simultaneously. Here I am picking up the scope that he made for us for the museum. It's a gorgeous Newtonian, Dobsonian, I guess, and beautiful piece of woodworking. And I actually wanted to just introduce you to Normand here. I've got a short film that we made when we went to pick up this scope, and so I'm just going to let him speak a bit for himself. So hopefully the sound will work.
It's just a matter of wanting to do something. It's not, nobody forced it on me. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was my trademark. Perfect. At one point, my business card was The Man in the Moon, and I said, let's do a solar eclipse or a moon eclipse. Well, I'm Normand Fulham. I'm from Pointe-aux-Trembles, east side of Montreal, east end of Montreal. People starting to ask me to make the mirror small, 8, 6, 10, 12 inches, and at one point I said, well, should be fun maybe to do just for a living. After 2 years, I felt comfy. My wife, were you comfy, chérie, when I left my job? So this side of the shop is all optic. Grinding, polishing, figuring from 6 inches up to 50 inches in diameters. All the machine that you see are homemade, that I build all my machinery. All the testing system, all the manipulating, sucking cup to move the mirror around. So now the other side is more mechanical, assembling. Well, the oven is there. And this is the kiln, my pizza oven. So inside you got elements on the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. So it's all computer controlled. So on this side here, this is my vacuum chamber to do the coating. Homemade again. Yeah. Because I couldn't afford to buy one. So it took about a year to build.
Can I ask you, when you first took the air out of it, were you scared?
Oh yeah. One day I said, I got to build my own guitar one day. And then 3-4 years ago, I said, well, let's try it. So I built my first guitar, the only guitar I built. I play in open mics and everything. People go nuts about the sounds. Oh, wow, what kind of guitar is that? Well, I built it. You want to make me one? I said, no. It's a very good sound guitar. My dream project? Oh boy. That would be to have a place in the Rockies for my wife's horses and my observatories with a big 50-inch in there. And that's my compressor.
So there, that's an extraordinary individual. I was so delighted to meet him. People like that, of course, make me feel particularly inadequate about my own accomplishments at times. Like, not only does he make some of the most beautiful and exquisite optical instruments in the country, but of course, hand built all of the machinery that he needs to make said instruments. Plus, invented a whole new technique for creating 50-inch mirrors and all that. So, okay, and then just decides to make himself a guitar. As a new hobby. Anyway, I showed you Sky News briefly there. I'll talk about it again in a moment, but I wanted to introduce you to some of our other publications for those who aren't familiar with them. The journal, obviously this is just the top part of the journal. I've cut it off here, is the peer-reviewed periodical that still appears in a lot of Canadian universities and libraries. Although it's not really as academic a journal as it was once. There are still somewhat academic articles in it, and then there are other articles that are much more, I think, accessible to a lay reader. That deal with various topics around observational astronomy and also astrophotography and such. Here's our Observer's Handbook, the most recent edition for 2021, both the Canadian and the American edition. We do an American edition for our friends south of the border. A fair number of people from the Astronomical League buy them, and people are asking, why do we need a separate USA edition? Well, first of all, just slight difference in latitude. We set the latitude for most of the observations to obviously the friendlier latitude that many of the U.S. Observing sites would be at, but also, of course, we switched the units over to being imperial. So the U.S. edition. We have our calendar, our observing calendar. That's very popular every year with photographs curated from amongst our pictures our members have taken and submit over the course of the year, and also includes key dates highlighted throughout the year for major astronomical events. There's that Explore the Universe guide I was telling you about earlier, which is our guide for really introducing people to the art of visual observing, but is useful to people at any level of experience as well. And it's just a handy little smaller paperback to carry around than this one. Bridging those two, this year we introduced a brand new book written by CBC journalist and Mask member Nicole Mortellaro called The Night Sky Almanac. So this is a slim, full color, star chart heavy publication that really is, again, a useful book for people to have to figure out what to see at various different times of the year. And particularly if you find a beast like the Observer's Handbook too intimidating, the Night Sky Almanac is again much more approachable. So back to Sky News. Sky News, of course, we acquired, as I said, back in 2015. Although we've been giving it out as a benefit to our members for a couple of years before that. It was a bit of an albatross around our neck for a couple of years. The outgoing editorial board and such were having real trouble trying to turn a profit with the publication. And in fact, we operated at a loss for a couple of years in a row. In fact, a quite substantial loss just the year before I started. We have since turned that around. We've got a brand new look and feel, a wonderful new art director, a wonderful new editor-in-chief, some new contributors and such, and Sky News is back in the black and profitable again, and hopefully you find it a good read and a good look. With the new magazine came a new website as well, which we wanted to make a much better destination for people who want to find out about what's going on in the night sky at any given time. So do check out the Sky, even if you never read the magazine, do check out the Sky News website for lots of information about what's happening. Here you see the winner of our Photo of the Week contest for this week, which there's a Photo of the Week contest at Sky News. In this case, it's the Flying Bat and Squid Nebulae by Dan Cruz. So you can see that was September's winner. For those of you who are interested in astrophotography, I should point out that you are welcome to. It's not only for RASC members, but anyone can enter the Photo of the Week contest for Sky News. And of course, the Photo of the Week winners get rolled up at the end of the year to win a Photo of the Year prize, get featured in various places. We commemorate them in a magnet that gets given out as a premium for subscribers to the magazine. But perhaps more importantly than what we do with your photograph and such, which I know is of course a primary concern to you, there's also the swag you get to win by winning these contests. So our grand prize this year is going to be an advanced VX 8-inch Edge telescope by Celestron. Everything else, all the other prizes are being donated by Skywatcher this year. They stepped up this year and said, we really want to be part of this contest. And so everything beyond the grand prize is by Skywatcher. For some of the runner-up prizes and such, RASC gives out everything from some gift memberships and gift subscriptions and other swag items we have, including some of our own like T-shirts and things like that. But here you can see some examples of the winners, of past winners and such from various different categories. I will say this year we've introduced a new category beyond like our grand prize, best lunar, solar, planetary, best landscape, best deep sky. We have a youth category now. So for all of you young budding astrophotographers out there, please submit your photos here. And we'll make sure that they get up on the website. We'll make sure they get lots of attention. Who knows? They may actually end up appearing in our calendar in one of our other publications as well. So do check out these contests. Last project I want to talk to you about. Another beast that was purchased basically just the year before I started and purchased without much of a game plan as to what we were going to do with it. But it's our robotic telescope. So this is a lovely 16-inch like university grade professional research scope, and it's housed at the Sierra Remote Observatory up in the Sierra Nevada mountains on the edge of the border of Nevada. And so it's in California, but it's on the edge of the Nevada border. This is an observatory spot that has amazing clear nights a lot of the year. And the sheds here basically have rental space in them where different organizations and in some cases individual celebrities and such are housing their robotic scopes that they run remotely. And so this is shed number 9 down here at the bottom, and that's our scope in shed number 9. You can see it there. So we are starting to use it, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we're using it. I was very excited because Jenna, again, a very energetic individual, stepped forward and helped work with me to develop an actual business plan for how we could actually, get some real use out of this scope, having acquired it and not really thought that through. And we were all ready to get started with that. 2020 was the year that we were going to take off with robotic telescope. And then, man, 2020, what a year. Not just COVID, which of course, not the worst problem for a robotic telescope, because after all, you're doing everything remotely. Not a problem. But you know what is a problem? California wildfires. So California wildfires swept all up and down the mountain range and covered the sky with smoke and soot and ash and burned their way right to the base of the mountain on which our observatory is set. You can see a fire truck and a fire chief's vehicle and such here at the observatory. Fortunately, there was no damage done by fires because the fire burned itself around in an old creek bed around the base of the mountain and burned itself out. And so not only did it not destroy our observatory, but it actually created a lovely fire break that should give us about 10 years worth of security against the next couple of wildfires in California. Unfortunately, it was still problematic. So even though our observatory didn't burn and melt, we still had all this haze and smoke and ash. And let me tell you, if you wanted to engineer a substance to like really mess with a fine optical instrument, you know, fine particulate wood smoke and ash would be like way up there on the things you would research. So the cleaning and such we've had to do just to get our instrument back in shape has been pretty extensive, and it's taken a long while. It probably needs to be recollimated a bit, but the scope is so good that it doesn't really matter, and we can't get down there and collimate it because of course we can't travel right now. So and the people on site, yeah, we don't really want them doing that for us because that involves, with a scope like this, collimation. It's not just shining a laser down the tube, it's like taking the tube apart. So we want to wait till we can go and do it ourselves. But I just want to show you some of the gorgeous photos that have been taken from this scope. So here you see Dan Meek's Horsehead Nebula, Doug McDonald's picture of the Cygnus Wall area of the North American Nebula. Well, while we were still unable to sort of commercially run our scope, we ran a little contest where we released a little bit of data to the membership. It said, here, make of this what you will. And here you see 3 different members processing the same image of the Dumbbell Nebula. And so you can see what the post-processing can do with the kind of data that we produce. We also started running a contest similar to the Sky News Photo of the Week contests for people using data from the scope. And so we would release a little packet of data once a month, and we would give a prize to whoever did the best production value on the data from the scope. Here you see our October contest winner, part of the Eastern Veil Nebula in Cygnus. And I think it's a lovely photo that Jeff Dutton produced here. Jenna would not want me to just talk about astrophotography, though. We're actually using this scope for outreach in schools. So we have a program where we work with high school classes to have them identify targets in likely candidate systems, and then track the light emitted by the primary, the sun in each of those systems, to literally look for transits of exoplanets. So these are high school students for projects in their science class who are transiting exoplanets. Can you imagine if we had that opportunity when we were in high school? I mean, who knows how many future astronomers and astrophysicists we're creating just by having a program like this available. But we're trying to get into as many schools as we can. We've got unfortunately, it's a very laborious hands-on program where a couple of classes a year get basically taught directly by Jenna and their teacher. They get to go on the scope at night, do a customized data run, watch the scope, take the images for them, and then do all that. We're never going to be able to scale that up to get it to thousands and thousands of classrooms across the country. So we have a simplified version of the program where we have pre-canned data from the telescope, and we basically have written up lesson plans and such, and have created a whole little curriculum that so local science teachers and such can work with their students. But it doesn't require them accessing our scope all at once, and there just aren't enough observing nights during the year for us to be able to hit as many schools as we'd like to, especially not if we're going to have people also do astrophotography and other scientific projects with our scope. Anyway, here's how we've set this up. There's kind of 3 tiers of membership on the robotic telescope. You can subscribe to just the data. And what that gets you is all the astrophotography and scientific data taken by the scope in a given year. That's open to anyone. For RASC members, we have two other tiers that are just starting up later this spring. And that is, you can join one of the teams that runs the scope. So there's the astrophotography team and the science team. So you can join one of those two teams and become one of the people who decides what the scope's going to point at any given night, what the runs are going to be like, what the images are going to be taken. So you're ultimately getting, first crack at the images and such of your choice. And of course, you get to be part of these forums that we're setting up, where you get to talk to the other team members and share your insights, and also collaborate on joint projects. And there's some interesting. The science team most recently was doing a project replicating the work that had been done on looking at Cepheid variables in Andromeda. The very first evidence that we had that Andromeda was another galaxy, and that the Milky Way was not alone in the universe, and that the universe was actually a much bigger place than we thought it was. So they were replicating some of that work on standard candles using Cepheid variables, and that's kind of exciting. But they have some actual new research they want to do, not just replications of old research as well. So that's those two teams. Last but not least, we're going to set aside one day a week for people to book time on the scope by the hour, where people will simply, and this is the one time you get to be in the driver's seat, with the caveat that you don't actually get to drive the scope. You still have to have somebody from the OBS team working with you. It's an expensive instrument. We're not going to let just anybody, spin it around in the shed and you potentially bang it against a wall or point it at Venus and burn out all the optics or something, because the scope is not good for certain kinds of things. It's really not good for planetary observation because it's just too sensitive, right? It just gathers way too much light. And so, even Uranus is a bright white ball when you look at it through this thing. So it's pointing it at Venus would be lethal. So we're not going to let people actually drive the scope, but we're going to let you direct it. It's your time. Whatever you want to image, we'll image, and we will direct it as you say. And we'll offer advice, and we'll explain. No, but there's a reason we can't point at that right now because it's below the horizon, or if you wait 3 weeks, you'll get a better view of that target. So we're there to actually help people along as well. This is the one circumstance where data coming out of the scope becomes proprietary. If you've paid for the time on the scope and you're doing it by the hour, that's your data. You're the only one that ever gets to handle it. So anyway, we've tried to price this very reasonably, just because we just want the scope to pay for itself. We're not trying to make money off of this. This is not going to be another revenue stream for RASC. We just want the scope not to cost us. And so for data users, the people who are subscribing to a year's worth of data, you get a year's worth of data for $100. Right now, if you subscribe, you actually get the first 2 years of data, because we're giving all of 2019 and 2020's data right now. 2 years worth of data for $200, for $100, $50 for youth members, I should say. And then for RAC members, if you want to become a member of the team, that's $300 for a year, $150 if you're a youth, and by the hour, $75 an hour to actually sort of pilot the scope. Anyway, bunch of little projects that are going on. I thank you all for your time and attention. I look forward to us being able to get together for live meetings, but until we can, here's a little comic from my favorite online science comics, XKCD, to remind us about live stargazing events. So once again, thank you very much for having me here. My email address at the bottom, phil@rasc.ca. Feel free to contact me anytime. And I'm very happy to have been invited to be here.
Phil, thank you so much. Absolutely splendid. And I'll tell you, I'm telling the rest of you, Phil knows this, of course, that I've had opportunity to visit the offices, and Phil's, shown me around and shown me some of the artifacts that are going to end up in the museum, and some of them are just absolutely amazing. And of course, I said to Phil, "Oh, you got to do a little show and tell, Phil," and I'm so glad that he was able to do that, and so much more. It was fantastic. Phil, we got to brag a little bit here too. We're not without some artifacts and replicas ourselves,
Oh, that's
So
gorgeous.
You showed us yours, so
Yeah. Now, does yours work? Because I'll be like, my Galileo scopes are terrible. They're not really optic instruments. They're pretty, but they're not really functional.
Well, this is functional, but it's still terrible because it's supposed to be terrible.
Yes, it's terrible in the right way. Is what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The Newtonian does work. The Newtonian I have is a functioning scope, but the Galileos are just tubes with terrible lenses on the ends that really don't do anything.
And when I had the opportunity to see the Newtonian, it's just beautiful. It is an absolute work of art, I'm sure there are some people that may have questions. I'm going to, many of our members, of course, are very familiar with the RASC handbook because we buy them in bulk. And for our members, they're fantastic. And I'm sure some of our members here tonight may have questions for you, and I've got a few too. But I'm going to start out because I get to, because I've got the microphone on right now, and I'm going to ask the most frivolous of questions. Right? Now, I've been involved in amateur astronomy in this country for a long time, since I was very young, in the days well before the HAA. We've been around for 27 years, and of course I was involved in the field long before that. But I have to ask the most frivolous of questions here. Back then, in the days when I was involved in the RASC, and that it was the RASC. Nobody ever said RASC. And now everybody says RASC, and I just can't get the word to come out of my mouth. So what's the deal, Phil?
So for me, I can say I'm going to play the dumb new guy card, right? Because it's 14 months I've been involved with this organization. So I feel I can say whatever I want. So I just always abbreviated it to RASC. But I will say, I'm not alone. As you're saying, it is common usage now to pronounce it that way, and especially like our discussion board is called the Rascals and such. So I think it just seemed natural to say it rather than spell it out. I could go either way. I have no problem with RASC. The real sticking point for people seems to be whether or not it should be the RASC. The RASC, whether the is an intrinsic part of it because it's the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada or not, and our style guide says not. Our style guide says not to say the RASC, but instead to just use RASC or RASC on its own without an article. So that's the one thing I can answer definitively.
Well, thanks, because now the next time we're all just going to be sitting around going, well, is it HAA or is it the HAA? So thanks for putting that thought in our head. Certainly, when the day comes that you're in your new venue and you have the museum set up, I'm going to suggest everybody go to have a look because it's fantastic. Norman Fulham's scope is the wood one is an absolute work of art. I've observed with him, and he's a hoot. And that guy, the instrument that you have there is absolutely fantastic. So when that time comes that opportunity presents itself, I'm going to encourage everybody to go and see. Does anybody have any questions for Phil?
Yes, definitely. So
yes, please.
I'm going to get started if that's okay, John. I've got a couple of questions in the chat. If you have a question, throw one in the chat, and I will work through them for you. And the first thing that I have to say is I'm going to throw in my own comment. I have had the privilege of jamming with Normand Follon with his guitar at Starfest. And it's a much looked, I guess we all look forward to it when he shows up with his guitar. And you're right, everyone asks him, where'd you get that guitar? He goes, I made it. And it's absolutely beautiful. And it sounds incredible. And to sing with him it's really cool. So that's just my aside about Normand. And he builds beautiful telescopes. So my first question is from Doug Curry, who has been watching on YouTube tonight. He says, Mr. Groff, an interesting talk about the history of the RASC and current projects. My question is, what do you think of the Algonquin radio telescope, its history, current use, accessibility, and future potential?
Okay, so that's a question that actually transcends my personal knowledge and expertise at this point. So I'm going to play dumb new guy card. I didn't talk much about radio astronomy in my history piece there. That of course was something that was growing during that middle period, the middle slide that I had there, and of course becoming a dominant portion of the of one segment of astronomy. It's often ignored by people who like pretty pictures, and I think we all kind of got Hubble fever in the early 90s and such, when those were some of the first images that were circulated around on the internet. It was pointed out to me were those free images from the Hubble Space Telescope. And so I think that the contribution of radio astronomy and such kind of got forgotten and overshadowed by a sort of a renewed interest in the pretty pictures side of the field. So I can't speak too much to the particular instrument in Algonquin, but I will say that I feel that Canadians have always been an important part of the whole radio astronomy field, from the Dominion Radio Astronomical Observatory when it was built and onward. And I think now today, with things like the disaster at Arecibo and such, I think Canadians are poised once again to make some great contributions to radio astronomy. And so I realize that's a very superficial answer, and I apologize for that. I wish I could say something more meaningful.
All right, Phil, I have another question. Just give me 1 second though.
Yeah.
My alarm went off. A second question again from Doug Curry. And he is looking for a type of book in the dictionary or encyclopedia with a focus on a combination of science fiction and science fact related to exoplanets and sci-fi races. Would RASC Library have anything, or could you recommend anything to him?
Wow. Okay. Huge fan of science fiction. That's really what got me interested in science in the first place when I was a young lad. I grew up with a father who, I'm going to sound like a terrible Canadian here, but my dad didn't watch hockey, so he didn't teach me to watch hockey, but he did watch Star Trek, and got me into science fiction and such. So I'm familiar with some books out there that deal with sort of classic science fiction races. I mean, the grand old daddy of those books that those of you who are kind of my age or older and remember the Science Fiction Book Club will know: Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials. I don't. It's not a comprehensive volume, but it's a good volume for what it is, and I'm sure that the internet, there are certainly places that specialize in the internet, websites and such, with like the races and such of various science fiction properties. I mean, there's Wikipedia for Star Wars fans, things like that. I'm not familiar with any sort of one-stop book that's a dictionary or encyclopedia of the type you're looking for. My best guess would be that a publisher like DK that likes to publish. I know that DK, for example, has a comprehensive encyclopedia of the Marvel comic book universe and another one of the DC comic book universe. It would not surprise me if they had similar volumes of various science fiction franchises as well. So DK Publishers is my recommendation. Barlow's Guide, if you can find an old copy of it. But we don't have anything, unfortunately, in the Rask library that would meet your needs. But if we did, I would be reading it every day, which is probably a good reason not to have one there. So.
Thanks, Phil. I have another question from Ronald Shields as well. He's listening in on YouTube tonight. What are the requirements for an astronomy club to join the Rask? I am a Rask member and currently live in Elliott Lake, Ontario, formerly from Hamilton. I want to revive the local astronomy club here.
The requirements are that you ask. Seriously, give me a call, send me an email, and we'll talk about it. There's no minimum numbers or anything like that. We have dealt with some very small clubs. Our 30th center just joined us less than 2 months ago, and it's the Fraser Valley Astronomers from the Fraser Valley in BC. Currently, only 9 members in our society. So it doesn't have to be something the size of the Hamilton Amateur Astronomers or whatever to get in. Basically, your membership has to want to join. You'll want to look at your bylaws, and we have a recommended set of bylaws to work from and such to make sure that your bylaw reflects the fact that you're now a center of the Rask, that sort of thing, and we've got language for that to help you with that. Once you've revised and approved those bylaws, you bring them to us. Our Constitution Committee looks at them, says, yep, they're okay, and then the board of the Rask formally admits you. And so that's the process we literally just went through that I helped shepherd the Fraser Valley Astronomers through. It's not very onerous. And I'd love to work with you on getting the Astronomy Club in Elliott Lake as part of the Rask. I'd love to help shepherd, Center 31. Just like Messier 31, it's Kismet. You can call yourselves, the Andromeda, astronomers.
And Phil, I'm waiting for clarification on one more message, but that's the messages I see in the chat at this point in time. I don't see any hands up either at this point in time.
Well, Sue, if that comes through, then you could pass it along later on, perhaps, if that's okay.
You know what? That's perfect. I think it's time for a break anyway.
I think it is. Phil, on behalf of all of us here, the others that are following us on YouTube and that, thank you so much for joining us this evening and providing such an entertaining tour of your organization. You do such a fantastic job. You're so personable. You're a great ambassador for the RASC. And thank you so much for taking the time to visit us this evening. A great pleasure, Phil.
Well, thank you. As I said, I will come visit you in person when I'm able to again, and I promise when I do that, I'll actually perform a magic trick for you as well. Because one of the things I didn't mention in my introduction is I'm also a professional magician, and so.
So, John, I have clarification on the question.
Oh, sure.
So this comes from Denise and Chris. They want to know how much influence Bruce Blair had on the club, if any.
That unfortunately, that's a question I would have to defer to Randall on. I don't know off the top of my head how much influence Bruce Blair had on the club. I would have to go do a bit of research on that. But I'm happy to look into it, and I'm happy to pass the question on to Randall and have him get back to you if you want to give me an email address or something where I can have an answer forwarded to you.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you, everybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute break. Of course, when we come back, we have door prizes. And we have the always entertaining Matthew Mannering with the Sky this month that you don't want to miss. So by all means, take your opportunity to take your break and come on back in 5 minutes, and we'll carry on with that. Phil, you're welcome to stick around. Of course, you're more than happy to. Who knows? You might win a door prize. So
thank you. I think I will take my leave, but thank you very much again for a wonderful welcome.
Thanks very much, Phil. Everybody else, we'll see you in 5 minutes. We've got 3 fantastic door prizes to hand out. We'll see you then.
Hi, Michael. I thought I'd been disconnected or something. I guess not.
Well, I don't know. I can only see myself.
Yeah, and all I can see is you. But maybe after the break, they reconnect.
Okay, I've got Matthew.
This is Joanne, and all I can see is a screen with dots.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about, Joanne. Like,
Gary is sharing his screen right now. That's why we're seeing his screen.
Yeah, I can see Gary.
And we can also
Matthew.
see Mike Jefferson. And Denise. Oh, Chris, anyway.
I'm going to take a quick break.
All right, turn off your video, Mike.
Yep. So
Okay,
Gary,
excuse me,
you can
everybody.
stop
I'm going
sharing
to
your
interrupt
screen.
for a sec. No, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to interrupt for a sec and ask Sue if we are close to being ready.
We are close to being ready, but we have one of our participants who is sharing their screen right now.
Yeah.
And so, Gary, do you know how to stop sharing your screen?
Not sure.
Okay, so go up to the
Can you
top
hear
of
me?
the screen and it'll say stop sharing.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you.
Hey, there we go.
There
Excellent.
we go. All right. Thank you, Gary.
So once again, if I may, I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves and turn their cameras off so that if anybody that's watching on active speaker mode won't keep getting to see you every time there's a little sound. So if everybody's back and we're ready to go, that's fantastic. Thank you all for sticking around. That's great. Good to see all of you. So we have some door prizes. We have Matthew Mannering with the Sky this month. A couple of announcements before we go. So this evening, we have three fantastic door prizes here. So for those that want to snuggle up with a good book on a snowy day like this, we have Andrew Ian's Cosmos, Possible Worlds. Of course, Andrew Ian is the wife of Carl Sagan, who wrote the original Cosmos. So this is the one that came out not that long ago. Fantastic, absolutely gorgeous book. That's absolutely lovely. So we have the Firefly Night Sky Atlas, an excellent beginner book. It's got a little bit of everything that you want to see in here. Some wonderful star maps, some terrific content about different stuff to observe, and then also constellation by constellation sections with highlights of what's going on in each constellation. That's an absolutely wonderful book. And one of the classics, right? The Backyard Astronomer's Guide by Terence Dickinson, a Canadian book, an absolute classic. Can't say enough good things about this book. I particularly recommend page 199 with a lovely illustration of Jupiter there. Modesty prevents me from telling you that it's my illustration. I'll just let you look that up yourself, okay? So those are the three books that we have tonight. And we have Maya here. Hi, Maya, how are you?
Hello, I'm good.
Fantastic. It's great to see you, Maya. And you are ready to tell us who tonight's winners are.
Yes, I am.
Wonderful.
So, first off, we have Lorraine. Ta-da! Yay!
Lorraine, fantastic. Congratulations. Lorraine, are you here with us?
There's two Lorraines though, isn't there? So I don't know what Lorraine.
Yes, Lorraine, there are two Lorraines,
So I
but
don't know which Lorraine.
it's you.
Yeah, because we have Lorraine, like just.
And Lorraine, you are Lorraine, and the other Lorraine is Lorraine Rogers, and she has left the meeting. So Lorraine, the book is yours.
Yay. Fantastic. Congratulations, Lorraine.
Thank
Lorraine, you and our other winners tonight, just get in touch with me directly, okay? And we will arrange can arrange porch pickup for you.
Say what prize you want now, though.
So Maya, who's up next?
And next we have Anastasia.
Yay, fantastic.
Yay!
Anastasia, I saw you on here earlier. There you are. Hi, Anastasia. Congratulations.
I never win anything, so I'm super excited.
So tonight is your night. Good for you. So Anastasia, you have my email, I believe. So feel free to get in touch with me directly. And again, we'll arrange for you to get your prize. And who's our third winner tonight, Maya?
Our third winner is Sue.
Sue, yay. Sue deserves something for all the work she does.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Congratulations, Sue. That's wonderful. So that's great. Thank you so much, Maya. Fabulous job as always. For those that don't know, Maya goes old school. The list of participants in the evening are provided to Maya, and then she truly randomly selects from the list of participants, physically randomly selects, right? It's not even a pseudo random number generator or that. There you go. She literally throws the dice. So fantastic. So thank you so much, Maya. A wonderful job as always. Congratulations to our three winners tonight. Get in touch with me and we'll arrange for you to get your prizes. As always, we are delighted to have Matthew Mannering here with another edition of The Sky This Month, and I'm very happy to turn the floor over to Matt. Hi, Matt. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
So wonderful. So Matthew, it's all yours.
Okay. Hang on. Yes, I got to get out of all this stuff. There we go. Everybody hear me?
Yep, sounds good.
Yes, Matt, you're good.
All right. So welcome to The Sky This Month. I thought I'd start off the show with a reminder about the landing next week of Perseverance and Ingenuity on Mars. As you can see here, this is the last step when they drop Perseverance down to the surface and then disengage the cables. And then the lander vehicle takes off and drops down to the desert and destroys itself. But that's okay, as long as the rover's there, we're good. So this is all happening next week on the 18th, and the landing is supposed to occur at 3:55 p.m. Eastern. And unlike what I thought before, I thought we were actually going to see some sort of version of the actual descent and landing, if not in real time, at least very shortly after, but that's not happening. Apparently it's going to land, hopefully not make a crater in the process, and then they're going to, within a few hours, have a few test stills done by the cameras on board, and then sometime in the next few weeks after that, they'll release a movie of the descent and landing, which should be really awesome. Meanwhile, 2 other countries sent missions to Mars at the same time. One was the United Arab Emirates HOPE mission, and it got there on Tuesday, and it was their first attempt to get to Mars. It was successful. They worked in conjunction with Berkeley, California, who helped with the instrument package. And a couple of quick things about it. Going into a very high orbit between 22 and 44,000 kilometers for about 2 Earth years. And it's another instrument package that's going to look how Mars is gradually losing its atmosphere to the solar wind. And it's also going to see how dust storms play their part in Martian weather, which is important for when we eventually settle on Mars. Those settlers are going to need to know about any incoming dust storms, the size, the duration, all that kind of stuff, and it will affect the weather greatly. The Chinese also have sent a mission to Mars. It arrived there on Wednesday, the next day. Tianwen-1, this is very ambitious. They sent not just an orbiter, but they sent a lander and a rover, all in the first mission. So went into orbit on Wednesday, hoping to land in May. And this was a test image they took from the spacecraft itself when it was still 2.2 million clicks out, just for, I guess, something to do. Here's an illustration of the orbiter, the rover with its fold-out solar panels, and the lander that the rover would sit on and then go down a ramp to get off. You can actually see it's a six-wheeled vehicle, and it's just about the same size as the Perseverance rover. Hoping to land in Utopia Planitia, which is a huge, relatively wide open basin in the northern part of Mars. And the whole mission is named after a poem that's called Questions to Heaven that was written about 2,300 years ago by a Chinese poet. And it asks a whole bunch of questions about, I presume, about the life and nature and all those sorts of things in that time period. Here's a map of Mars, and just for some sort of reference, there's Valles Marineris. That's their great big Grand Canyon. That's a heck of a lot bigger than our Grand Canyon. The highest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons. And then when you come over here, Syrtis Major. And in Jezero Crater, that's where Perseverance is going to land next week. And there's Utopia Planitia, where the Chinese hope to land. And just for the heck of it, there's Curiosity over at Gale Crater there. Give you some idea about how the missions are scattered all over the place. Next, I want to talk about the constellation of Cancer, which I call the invisible constellation. And the reason I call it the invisible constellation is because, well, from the suburbs, the urban areas, you can't see it. It's just not there. But it is worth looking for because of the objects in it, rather than for the rather dim stars itself. You can see the way it's laid out. Two of these stars here represent the eyes on the crab. Then one star is the right claw, the other star is the left claw, and then the backward facing ones are the legs of the crab. And just keep in mind this star right here on the right claw for later. So find the constellation you can't actually see. Look south about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and look for Gemini and look for Castor Pollux up there, the two heads of the twins. And then look for Leo over here, and look for Regulus, which is the brightest star in Leo, other than maybe the nebula at the other end. In the middle is a dead part of sky, just literally dead from my backyard, can't see a darn thing. But if you use binoculars, there's a couple of targets you can pick out in there and look even better in scopes. So here's we're moving in, we're getting closer. Again, Gemini there, Leo here. Another couple of stars I want you to remember is Procyon, this really bright one here, below Gemini, and Algeba, which is the shoulder of the lion, or in some cases you'd say it's sort of the middle star of, I call it the question mark, but it's called the sickle by a lot of other people. One thing you'll notice is that going down on an angle here is the plane of the ecliptic. That is the path that the planets take through the sky from our perspective on Earth. And you can see it goes right through the center of Cancer, which means it's a zodiac constellation, just like Leo and Gemini are. Here we're moving in even closer again, and now the targets are fairly visible. Just here, just above the plane of the ecliptic, is the Beehive, M44. This is a beautiful, huge open cluster. It's not very distant, and it's a really nice target, even in binoculars. And down here, M67 is a much fainter, further away open cluster, but also a good target once you figure out how to point to it. And if you remember, I talked about the right claw of Cancer. And just off of that claw is a star called Copernicus. So I was on Sky Safari just a few weeks ago, and I'm looking at Cancer and thinking about what to talk about. And I saw this star. It's called Copernicus. I thought, what the heck is a star called Copernicus doing in the constellation Cancer? Never heard of it. So that got me to looking things up. And of course, that always means more work. So let's start looking for some of the targets. So assuming you can see some of the brighter stars in Gemini, and you can see Regulus and maybe Algebra, you're good. So to start off, to find the beehive M44, which is just basically on the plane of the ecliptic, look for this star, which is at the hip of Pollux, the twin Pollux, and it's called Wasat, and draw a straight line right along the ecliptic to Regulus. Almost exactly halfway in between those two stars, on that line or just above it, is M44, the beehive. I guarantee if you run your binoculars in that area of sky, you're going to see it. They are bright, and it's a large cluster. So here's an image with M44, the beehive there, and this is actually Mars in one of the occurrences where it was approaching and probably went through the open cluster. Now, the beehive is a really young cluster. It's also fairly close. Consequently, it's a nice grouping, and it's actually quite large, about 1.5 degrees across. If you're going to use a telescope, try and use a short tube, like a short refractor with a wide field, and put on a bit of magnification, but you really want about 2 degrees of sky to capture the whole thing properly. In some ways, binoculars are still probably the better instrument to use, but you can get away with a wide field scope. Now, it just so happens that this year, on June 23rd, Mars is going to be back into the beehive. And unfortunately, it's right around summer solstice, but there's a chance you'll be able to see it because at about 10 o'clock at night on the 23rd, Mars will still be about 13.5 degrees above the horizon, which means it will be just at the edge of the glare of twilight there. So if you can find Venus in the twilight and then work your way up, find Mars, if you put binoculars there, you're going to have the beehive right there. Now, M67 is only about 0.5 degree across. It's actually physically about the same size as a beehive, but it's about 3 times further away. So it's a lot dimmer and visually smaller, but you can get to it easy enough. Start at Procyon over in Canis Minor. Draw a line straight across to Algebra, the shoulder of Leo. Halfway along, literally halfway along, just below it, you're going to see M67. It should be visible in binoculars. It's a better target for a telescope. If you can't see, for instance, Algebra, do Regulus to Procyon, and this time the line will be just below M67, and you can work your way to it either way. M67 is really interesting. It's a very, very old cluster compared to most. It's in fact the oldest close by cluster that there is in our galaxy. It's somewhere between 3.5 and 5 billion years old. Now, normally after some hundreds of millions of years, the clusters start to disassemble. They start to spread out, and eventually there is no cluster. They're just stars out there in the sky, and you wouldn't know that they all originated from the same point. But this one is held together for some reason. It's very ancient, and so it's well worth a look. And it's still a big enough target that with a scope, you're going to get a nice view of it. Now, if you remember that right claw of Cancer right there, there's a line of stars that form a nice S shape that take you right to Copernicus. These are about 7th, 8th magnitude stars, and you should be able to follow them with binoculars, and you're going to come to these 2 stars side by side. The one you're interested in is the one on the left, Copernicus. There's a yellow one right beside it. Both of these stars are binaries, but they're not related to each other. So they're each binary systems, but Copernicus and 53 Cancri are separate systems. They just happen to be in alignment visually. So the reason I have this great big radio telescope pointing at Copernicus is because back in 2003, we sent something called the Cosmic Call number 2. And that's about 24 pages of binary information that's been sent and should arrive around 2044. So at the moment, that information packet is about halfway there. And the reason we sent it was because it turns out this is a really interesting system. So Copernicus, or 55 Cancri, was the closest system and the first system we found, I believe, that had 4 planets associated. And later that became 5. So there's quite a bit of information on this chart, but this slide. So let's have a look here. Up here on the left, this illustration shows the inner orbits of our solar system for Earth, Venus, and Mercury. And it shows the 4 inner planets in black of the planets that are around Copernicus. And you can see that all 4 of those planets orbit within what would be the Earth's orbit in our system. The 5th planet is way out there. And it turns out that it almost exactly mimics, in terms of orbit, our planet Jupiter. They're about the same distance out from their star and probably around the same rotational period around the orbit around the star. So here's a nice little chart here that looks really complicated, but it's not. But this is the kind of chart you're going to see, or table, when you're looking at things like this. So down here in the first column, you've got the names of the planets from closest to the star to furthest away. The first 4 are named after astronomers, and the last one is actually named after the guy who invented the telescope, which was just a couple of years before Galileo started using one. You'll notice that to the left of that, there's these individual letters, and they're not in sequence. Like, that's not B, C, D, E, F. It's all mixed up. They are named initially for the order in which they're discovered. So B was discovered first, then C, then D way out there, then E really in close, and then F. The second column is mass. And all you need to know about this is these little references here. If you see what looks like the sight for a gun through the scope, that represents Earth. So this is the mass of Earth equivalents. This is mass of Jupiter equivalents. So here, Janssen, closest one in, is 8 Earth masses, whereas the next one, Galileo, is 0.82 Jupiter masses, and so on down through the table. The next one is how far they are on average from the star. And we use a local numbering system, which is an astronomical unit. And that happens to be the distance from our sun to the Earth, which is about 150 million kilometers. So in order to figure out how far any of these are away from their star, you just multiply 150 million times this number. So 0.015 times 150 million is about 2.25 million kilometers. And you get out to here. Harriet is 0.78, say 0.8, that's 120 million kilometers out from its star. So really, it's just gives you an idea of how close they are into the star, how far away. Orbital period is in Earth days. Now, this is really cool. The first one here, Janssen, its orbital period is 0.7365 of an Earth day. If you call it 0.75 to round it out, that's 18 hours. So Janssen's year is 18 Earth hours long. It's pretty crazy, right? It's in really close to that star. And the further out you go, the longer the orbital period. Obviously, as you go further out, it gets longer and longer. And that's how you read these tables. It's not really that hard once you had a look at a few of them. Next, because we're having the 1-year anniversary of COVID-19 in Canada, I thought we should talk about epidemics. And in this case, how about the marsh of epidemics, which actually exists on the moon? Palus epidemiarum, or whatever it is, says epidemiarum. There you go. It's a really small sea, a mare, that is squished in between Mare nubium and Mare humorum. Nubium means clouds and humorum means moisture. So the marsh is jammed in between the sea of clouds and the sea of moisture. Now there's quite a bit going on for such a small mare out there, and they've got a really intricate rill system, which is like valleys that are carved into the to the plains of the sea, And there's several on the west side, there's several on the east side. And there's also a really cool little crater, which is a target for you to look for. So how do you get to the marsh of epidemics? Well, I would say you wait until a couple of days after first quarter, so that Copernicus, not the one we just talked about, this is just the crater on the moon, you look for that to be in the open and then come straight down south until you hit this really well-defined crater in Mare Nubium, and then go down at about 7 o'clock and you'll see these two craters that look like, you know, like they're duplicates and like eyeballs, you know, and you can run right between the eyeballs. There's sort of the nose. You're going to run right through there, and as soon as you do, you're going to be in the marsh of epidemics. But here we're going in closer. Again, there's the eyeballs, as I'm going to call them. You go through there and you're in. And you'll notice that this is a really irregularly shaped mare. It's kind of crazy because really it's this, it's just filling in the gaps between all these craters. And there's Marth, which is the crater we're going to be interested in. So it's Marth in the marsh. And this one down here is called Ramsden. So the rill systems, which are the valleys I'm talking about, for want of a better term, it's not really, they're like lines cut into the basalt. These run all through here. And there's another one that's running up through here. So there's quite a bit of detail depending on how good the light is. The closer the terminator is to say here, then the better you'll see the markings in that mare because the light will be at an extreme angle. Now we're really zoomed in. There's Ramsden. Here you can see the rills running all through here. And in fact, one runs almost all the way to Marth. The other one is not visible in this image. This is like a really early image, Ranger or something image. And it runs through here and into here, but it's 300 kilometers long, so it's not exactly short. And here's a real close-up of Marth, which is a really weird looking crater. It's a double-walled crater. There's only 6 or 7 of them on the moon, and they don't really know how they got formed. There's lots of guessing going on, but actually I haven't read anything that really definitively tells us how they're created. This is not a big crater. It's only 7 kilometers across, which is only about 3 3/4 arc seconds from our perspective, which means it's really a small feature. But even with probably a 100 millimeter scope, so a 4-inch scope is going to show it quite nicely as long as you use enough magnification to get in to the point where you can see the detail of the double ring there. So that's worth looking for. And certainly the rills are always interesting, and I always find the areas around the crater walls with all the secondary impacts and or later impacts and where craters have been filled in, all this kind of stuff is really interesting. So it's a really neat little section to look at. Here's another version of the same thing that all they've done is somebody has gone along and then actually drawn all the rills on here and Marth, and there's this other rill over here. It gives you a better idea of where stuff is. And so, you know, I'd like to think that come slightly warmer weather, at least, we can go out and have a look at stuff like that. Now, if you're going to talk about epidemics, you may as well talk about the guy who pioneered modern vaccines. And that guy is Edward Jenner, who I'd never heard of, but I looked him up. And he actually, in 1796, administered the first, what we'd call a modern vaccine. And for hundreds and hundreds of years before that, various cultures had already used vaccination for smallpox, especially. But it was not foolproof because what they did was there was 2 versions of smallpox. There was one that had a 30% chance of killing you, and the rest of you that lived were actually either blind or terribly disfigured from the pox. The other one was a much more or less virulent version that you only had a 1 or 2% chance of dying, but you could still die. But what they did was they took the one that was less virulent and they took some of it and scratched it into your arm and hoped that you didn't die. And the other problem with it was you were then could infect other people with it while you were building your own immunity. So what he did that was different, Jenner, was he took the crud out of the lesions on a cow, which is cowpox, and he used that on people. Now, the pox could be transmitted from animals to people, but once it's in people, apparently it can't be transmitted from people to people. So this was really good. Number one, it probably wouldn't kill you, and number two, you couldn't transmit it to other people. And so, quite rightly from the looks of it, he's often called the father of immunology. And they say that he probably saved more lives than the work of any other human in the history of humans. So a guy who probably should have more recognition than he does outside of his own speciality. And there, just for the heck of it, is a picture of him, probably about the time that he did come up with these vaccines. And just for the heck of it, there's a cow. So you know it's him, wouldn't be anybody else. And he has his own crater on the moon. So we're back to the moon again. Now, as you can see, he's right down here at the bottom of the screen, that little red dot, that's Jenner. This is an extremely difficult target, but it is entirely doable. You have to wait until the libration of the moon is just as extreme as it gets to the eastern side of the moon here, so almost 7 degrees. And the way you'll know that you've got it is Mare Crisium won't be against the edge. When visually it'll have moved in, and you'll be able to see these two small mare here, which is Marginis and Smythe. And I'll leave it to you to get hold of some maps and then find your way down to Jenner. But as long as you can see these two mare to the far shores of them, you're good. You should be able to pick up Jenner. And one of the people on Cloudy Nights was good enough at some point to actually take a picture of the region and actually photograph Jenner on purpose. So there it is. You can see the nice central peak in it. It should be visible in any kind of a half decent amateur scope. So he's not the only guy who is mixed up with vaccines and such who got himself a crater on the moon. It turns out that Pasteur has one as well, and he's got a nice big one. Look at that. Unfortunately for Pasteur, his crater is never visible because the termination line for libration runs, if you can see my pointer there, it runs sort of down like that. So Pasteur is actually on the back side of the moon, which is why the needle is very appropriate, because sometimes you get a needle in the back side. So it seems appropriate that Pasteur, you should remember it just like that. I guarantee you'll never forget that he's on the far side of the moon. Anyways, it seems like a good place to end, and that is definitely, according to this picture, the end.
Fantastic, Matthew. That's great. always entertaining. So, and informative and educational. That's great. No, we won't forget where Pasteur is. Seeing the image you showed of Mars passing through M44, the beehive cluster in Cancer, brought to mind the HAA Celestial Events calendar from 10 years ago, from 2011, which had a couple of nice images of Mars passing through the beehive on a couple of different nights and showing how Mars moved across there. And that beautiful image right there is by Bob Christmas, our newsletter editor. So beautiful image there, Bob. So thank you so much, Matthew. That's absolutely fantastic. To wrap up, we just have a few announcements. I have some announcements about upcoming events. First, Bernie has an announcement as well. Bernie, you have an announcement for us?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. If we can go to screen share. Oh, that's not what I want. Can anybody see my my logo?
No, we see you, Bernie.
We see you, yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't get my screen share in there then. Let's pull that down. Okay, anyway, I'm not able to play with it. What's going on here?
Oh, there you go.
Okay,
I
good.
see it now.
Awesome. Well, that's better. That's better. Let's get out of the way here. Slideshow. Thank you. From the beginning. There we are. Hi guys, I'm me. We'll go through this real quick. A couple of things going on this weekend. First of all, it's Family Day weekend. Happy Family Day to all of you, and hope you can spend time with your family. But if not, and even if you are, on Monday the 15th, there is a presentation being made by the Cranbourne Chase Dark Skies Festival in Cranbourne, England. It's a freebie. Just register for it. It's an introduction to stargazing with a fellow named Steve Tonkin. It's on Zoom. It's a freebie. Steve Tonkin is author of a couple of binocular astronomy books. Well worth the effort. The website or the link is, I'm circling it here, is cranbournechase.org.uk/events. I'll have that also at the end. It's a 1-hour program. It's great. Closer to home, we have Queen's University in Kingston offering a introductory astrophysics. I don't know that it's astrophysics, but it's designed for 15 to 18-year-old students in grades 11 and 12. So I'll be attending because that's about where my level of astrophysics is. Queen's University or queensu.ca/physics. Again, that's something that you need to register for. It's a 2-day event. The first day, the Saturday, is primarily for students. The second day is open to the general public, which would include you and me and the rest of us. Teachers are invited to attend this as well. Yes, on the 18th, we have the Mars landing, of course, well explained by Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. The Astronomical League, in conjunction with NASA, have put together an observing challenge. No, you do not have to observe the landing, which, no, you're not going to do that. But you can observe Mars. Information about the award program is available through the Astronomical League, www.astroleague.org. Follow it through and you'll find all the information you need there. You do not need to be a member of the Astronomical League to receive that certificate. So it's a nice, easy one to get. You need to make an observation of Mars, and there's a little outreach event related to it. This is my outreach event. So all you basically have to do is talk to somebody about it and get their involvement somehow or their interest in it. These are the links that I've used today. I hope you've got a chance to write them down. I'm just going to talk through them, and I hope that you get inspired to get out and see a little bit this week, this month, this year. Hopefully we get some clear skies sometime this decade. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks for those announcements, Bernie. So everybody, so I know it's very, very late. So I'm just going to let you know the upcoming events, of course. Next month, at our next meeting, we will be having Tom Field from Seattle, who's going to be talking to us about spectroscopy. I usually only let you know 1 month ahead of time, but I'm going to tell you now. In April, we're going to be Zoom meeting with the Canada, France, Hawaii telescope in Mauna Kea in Hawaii. Council meeting is next Tuesday on February the 16th. Everybody is welcome. And if you are interested in participating, just get in touch with me and we'll be happy to see you there. The beginners group will be meeting next Friday on February the 19th, having a splendid time. And I look forward to seeing the rest of the beginners group then. Don't forget, be sure to catch Mario Carr on CHCH on Sunday nights. And thank you very much to Phil for doing a great job for us tonight. Thank you very much to Matthew for doing a fantastic job for us tonight. For Sue and Chris for doing all the wonderful behind the scenes stuff. and Bernie for his announcements, and to Maya for getting the door prizes out into some worthy hands. Door prize winners, don't forget to get in touch with me directly. And thank you all so much for sticking with us through a very, very late night tonight. A pleasure to see you all, and we'll see you all next time. So thanks, everybody.